Hello and welcome to this edition of Naturally Scott. I'm so glad you're with us today. My guest on this episode is Bruce Barrett. If you don't know Bruce, I think you'll have some fun getting to know him. He is a lifelong birder, started in 1973, and has seen nearly 900 birds in the lower 48 American Birding Association area, more than anybody else in history. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about him being a mathematician. We're going to talk about how he has a mixed marriage. He's married to a non-birder, and they have traveled the world together. They sing in a chorus together. They've been happily married for 57 years. They have some marital advice rules that'll be fun for you guys to listen to, and I think you're going to enjoy today's episode, and I'm excited to get started, so let's do that. Hello and welcome to this edition of Naturally Scott. I'm Scott Harris, and I am really excited to welcome Bruce Barrett as our guest today. Bruce has a fascinating story, and I'm looking forward to him sharing that. You know, we have a lot of discussions on this show among birders. Not all of our guests are birders, but Bruce certainly is, about listing, the value of it and the importance, and who does and who doesn't, what kind of lists do people keep. Well, Bruce is an expert at keeping lists, and so we're going to be talking about that, as well as some of his other adventures. Bruce is a guest in our book, Why We Love Birds. So when that comes out in spring of 27, you'll be able to read Bruce's chapter, and I'm looking forward to you doing that. And off screen is his lovely wife, Brenda, who we're going to have an opportunity to meet a little bit later, but we're going to talk about beforehand. Matter of fact, we're going to talk about it right now. Bruce has been a birder, an avid birder, since 1973. And we're going to learn the story of how that came to happen. He has observed more birds in the lower 48 than anyone in the history of recorded civilization, which is kind of a cool thing, as I can hear Brenda giggling in the background. But it is true. Now, Brenda is not a birder per se, which means that they have a mixed marriage. And that mixed marriage has survived for 57 years. So it is time for me to shut up and let Bruce say hello to the audience and then explain how he has kept Brenda for 57 years blissfully. Go ahead, sir.
Hi. Yeah, we have a very simple rule. We like to do everything possible together, including chasing rarities, especially to places Brenda would like to go. And the simple rule is, as soon as the bird we've gone to look for has been found, and I've seen it and I'm happy, the rest of the time is Brenda's. And it works. I mean, we either spend 3 days staring at a feeder and the bird never turns up, or we spend 30 milliseconds staring at the feeder. Well, oh no, it takes me longer than that to say it's okay. And then we off to the museums or whatever Brenda wants to do. I should add that I do keep a list of birds that Brenda has laid eyes on. Nothing to do with identification. She can identify a lot of them. But I have kept a list of everything she has laid eyes on. It currently stands at 723. So I claim that she has the largest list for a non-listing non-birder.
Okay, you know what? That's probably true. It is interesting to me among listers, because of course, listers, and we're going to talk about the territory that you cover and the one that you're most excited about or most familiar with. But there are so many different lists that birders keep. I was talking to Dorian Anderson. He's going to be either the podcast just before you or just after you. But Dorian talks about how he keeps his eBird list for California. He lives fairly close to you. He lives in San Mateo. But he also has a separate eBird identity where he keeps track of the birds he has seen from his bicycle. Mm-hmm. So if he drives to get a bird, that's one thing. But if he pedals to get a bird, and he pedaled 18,000 miles across the country. But on shorter trips, he's pedaled up to 70 miles to look for a bird. So your wife having a bird list or the different things, it's kind of cool to figure out what people have. I know somebody, and I'll keep it a secret, but he has created an identity, an eBird identity, and he records all of the birds that he dreams about. And so, of course, he has to fudge in order to create that list, which is why I'm not going to share who it is. But he has an actual eBird list of birds that he has dreamed about. So if he dreamed that he was in Africa last night and saw, let's say, a little bee eater goes on his list. And so that is a different approach. But I imagine there are as many approaches as there are birders. So I think it's cool that Brenda has a list. I think it's going to engender a little bit of jealousy among some of our listeners who are actual birders and have been out trying to get birds and are nowhere near 723 birds. Dude, I've been doing it 5 years, and my ABA list is a little over 600. So I have to go a long way to catch a woman who doesn't bird, which makes it a little bit interesting. Now, you guys, you sing in a chorus.
Yep.
Tell us about that.
We sing, well, I've sung all my life, and we've been singing ever since we got together. We sing in a chorus in Dublin, California called Chorus Eclectic, and by the name we sing all sorts of stuff. And it's a social chorus. There is no what's the word I want? You don't have to pass an audition to get in. If you want to sing, you come sing with us. And we have a fabulous director who has turned a lot of non-singers into fabulous singers. There's 70 of us on the risers right now. So.
Wow. Is that a chorus term, on the risers?
Well, yeah, because...
Is that like getting on the bird?
You know what the risers are?
I do.
Yeah.
I just never heard the term. I love all of the terms that different groups and clubs and hobbies come up with that are kind of inside stuff, right? You know, it's just, oh yeah, we're on the risers. You know, I'm sorry, it's just a cool thing. Mm-hmm. So when is your next performance?
Good question. I don't know. Sometime in early December, I believe.
Okay.
We have a rather eclectic, again, that word again, set of Christmassy type stuff, including, for example, the Grinch. We're going to sing the Grinch song from, and a variation of Rudolph. And there's another one. I can't remember the name of it now. It's a German one about the negatives of Christmas. It's the devil coming down and what he will do to you if you don't behave yourself, type of thing. It's kind of fun.
With respect to our German audience, it would be the Germans that would come up with that. You can't imagine the Swiss or the Canadians coming up with a list of the negatives of Christmas. But somehow it's not shocking that the Germans have invested in that. All right, we are going to talk about your ABA list, which is getting close to 900, which is just spectacular. You're staying ahead of Brenda, which is a good thing. But let's back this journey up, because you got to Northern California by way of Canada and to Canada by way of the UK. Correct. So take us on that journey a little bit, and then infuse in there where birds kicked in, where birds became a part of it.
Right. I have always collected things, stamps, coins, bus numbers, train numbers. It's a genetic thing, I think. When we arrived in North America, we bought a bunch of books to introduce ourselves to our new environment, and then promptly put them away and forgot them. 3 years later, in 1973, I acquired a pair of binoculars. I have no idea who I got them from, what kind of binoculars they were.
Do you know why you got them?
Nope, no idea. To test them, I looked at a bird on my front lawn, and seeing the bird up close, I thought to myself, wow, look at the colors on that. I wonder what it is. So I dug out the book from storage and found the bird, and it said American robin. Well, I knew it wasn't a robin, but that's okay. Well, that's a different story. And I remember picking the book up and flicking through it, physically flicking through, and saying, I wonder how long it would take to see everything in here.
Now, I'm curious, did lights start blinking, or did bells go off? Did you hear sounds coming down from the heavens when in that moment your entire life changed?
No. It was a passing thought. Brenda, pretty soon after that, went on vacation back to England with our daughter, leaving me to my own devices. And I hooked up with some local birders who took me out, and the rest is history. That they indoctrinated me into the hobby.
Okay, fantastic. Now, let's back up, because I have a couple of questions about your story. I believe that field guide was a golden guide?
It was.
Do you still have it?
I may have it upstairs in our so-called library.
Okay.
The library is so full of books that you couldn't possibly find anything in there.
Like most of the used bookstores that I've been in my life. You know, you have any idea where this book is? Yeah, it's somewhere back in the other half. Well,
I know roughly where it is, but
yes, thank you very much for that. All right, tell the audience why a Brit does not believe that an American robin is a robin.
Because the word robin is associated with a different family of birds. And I knew that before getting interested in birds. It was just sort of part of the general education. The bird I was looking at, I thought was a thrush, which it is. It should not be called American robin. It should be called the North American red-breasted thrush. But I understand, of course, why it's called the robin is in that the early settlers, thank you, saw the red breast and associated it with the word they were used to in Europe.
Okay. Well, that makes some sense. Excuse me. I'm curious because you saw the bird, you were attracted, you grabbed some binoculars and a book. Were you at any point during that time when you came over from the UK, were you a herp guy? Were you interested in mammals,
Nope.
insects? Nope.
Nope. I had zero interest in wildlife. And for me, one of the major benefits of birding is it has opened my eyes to non-city stuff. I'm a Londoner. I was born and bred in London. I mean, anything other than concrete was unnatural. Oh, and
Now,
pigeons. Yeah.
you know what? And this is going to go back to the 57 years. She has heard you say that dozens of times in your life, and she still giggles. If nothing else, that explains why you're happily married after 57 years, because that's a really cool thing. Now, the darker side of your life, and most people might not know that there is one, but you were a gang member in your Canadian days in Ottawa. And, and I believe you're still in some ways associated with the gang, which might surprise some of your Northern California friends. So if you're willing to unburden yourself of this dark past, please share your gang life with us.
By coincidence, when I first started birding, there was a group of school teenagers who caught the disease all at the same time in their class. And they would go around on their bikes birding, and they were young, they're brilliant, they still are brilliant, and they were known as the bicycle gang. And if I could put some bicycles in the trunk of the car and some birders in the body of the car and drive them around, I learned a hell of a lot that way. It was like having live teachers every weekend. And I still know some of them are professional guides. Most of them are still living in Canada, in Ottawa or other parts of Canada. But I'm still friendly with a good half of them, and I've lost contact with the other half.
Well, maybe they're in jail. It's the mean streets of Ottawa, come back to haunt you at some point in your life. All right.
Don't underestimate Ottawa. It's a wonderful city to live in. The only problem with it is the length of the winters. That's why we're in California. The first snow comes down in September and the last snowstorm's in May.
I have discovered, and we live in a semi-retirement area in South Carolina, that you mentioned the length of the winters. The people that I know that really don't like winters, it's not the intensity as much as it is the length. If someone said, okay, you're going to have this for 75 or 90 days, I could put up with that. But you get up into the 150, 180 days, that's half of the life. I'm not going to do that. So you don't get those intense winters in Northern California? You're not digging snow out of the driveway or anything?
Snow. Remind me of the concept.
All right. Now, before we talk about your list and your record, something that you are justifiably proud of, talk to us about the ABA in general, because there's a variety of ways to look at the world in which you've been operating.
Yeah. The ABA, American Birding Association, was founded in 1969, and one of their objectives was to put structure around the hobby of birding, and the other was to put a list together so that everyone's using the same playing field when comparing lists. I mean, do you count that budgerigar that escaped from your neighbor's house? Well, no. Do you count? Well, simply put, they came out with the list. To some extent, they've drifted away from that. They still keep the list, but they are no longer focused on hardcore listing birders. They are much broader, advertising wildlife
which is by design.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So let me just jump in here. One of the recent podcasts that I did was with Wayne Glockner, who is the current executive director of the American Birding Association. So I'm going to put a little picture up and a link here. So if people want to go talk to Wayne, because that is one of the things he talks about, is that while their core mission is the same, the focus has shifted with time. So sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to throw that out there. So keep going, please.
So that the ABA keep lists for just about everything. The lower 48, the so-called ABA area which used to be the lower 48, Alaska and Canada, and part of France.
Were you checking to see if I was paying attention, Bruce?
Yeah, I was checking to see if you pay attention. It's true, though, that there's two islands of Canada that are legally and technically part of France, Papua and Michelin. They're part of the ABA area. Recently, I say last 10, 15 years, they added Hawaii, very controversial move. I'm sure a lot of it was to put more protection onto the Hawaiian birds, which they...
It might have been. And again, let me interrupt, because one of the other recent podcasts we did was with Jeff Gordon, who was the executive director of the American Birding Association when they brought Hawaii into the ABA fold. So I'm going to drop a link onto that too, if you want to go hear Jeff's view of that and what he thought when he did it and why he did it. That might be a fun thing for the listeners as well, and a way for me to try to get people to look at other podcasts.
So they keep separate lists. They keep the whole ABA list, which is all 50 states, Canada, and Saint-Pierre-Michelin. And then they'll keep the traditional list, and they'll keep the continental list. They just vary by the Hawaiian birds, plus or minus. They also keep every country, every region, the world as a whole, of course. And you can publish your lists into their documentation. The negative, and I'm going to throw a rock at some of my fellow birders here. Many birders object to these changes. They got on their high horse and they had a little tizzy when they added Hawaii. So they stopped sending their lists in to the ABA, which to me is kind of childish. It's like going to a baseball game and complaining that it doesn't follow the rules of cricket. Play the game according to the rules that's been set up for that game, is the way I would put it. So
and if the rules change, they change for everybody.
Yeah.
If the rules change, they change universally.
Yeah. And if you've got a list on the ABA list and another one on eBird, and they're not quite the same, and another one with your local friends, the rules are going to be different. Your lists are going to be different. It's a numbers game to that extent. Follow the rules. It's as simple as that. Don't back out just because the rules you don't agree with all the rules.
Well, there's a lot of birders. There's a lot of birders in this country. They're not all going to agree with all of the rules.
No.
So there you go. All right, let's focus down now. You're mostly focused as far as your list goes, although you do travel the world, and we'll talk about some of the places you've been. But your primary list is the lower 48, the contiguous 48 states. Is that right? Okay. And you are the record holder for the number of birds seen in the lower 48 states.
Yes.
And that record...
883.
800. Okay. All right. So now that just leads to a bunch of questions. 883 birds is a bucket load of birds.
Yeah.
I think that's the politest way I can put it. Do you remember the first bird on your ABA list, on your lower 48? I mean, the American robin would have been your first one.
Yeah. The first time we ever saw the United States was across the St. Lawrence River from Ontario into... Brenda's disagreeing with me. Oh, that's right. We saw the U.S., but that was before we were birding. The first time we saw the U.S. after I started birding was across the St. Lawrence River. Anyway, it's across the St. Lawrence River, either at Niagara. There's another looking in the mirror and calling myself an idiot.
Oh, we have the same mirror.
Yeah.
My mirror says that every day.
It is astonishing how we humans absorb information that is wrong. When we came to North America, we went to Canada. The U.S. was not on the cards for all sorts of reasons. And I remember looking across the St. Lawrence River into the U.S. and going, where are all the guns? Where are the cowboys? All I can see is trees. Now, I know that sounds damn stupid.
I don't think it does.
But it's just an example of how we get locked into wrong views by not traveling, by not going and seeing for ourselves. That's my lecture on encouraging everyone. We're on a wonderful planet. Go see it.
There's a lot to see. There is a lot to see. And, you bring that up, and Dorian Anderson, who was my interview yesterday for an upcoming podcast, that was the thing that he stressed, was you've got to get out and see these other countries to give you something. If you're concerned about the United States or madly in love with the United States, or both, as many of us are, Go see other countries, see how they function, see where we're strong, see where we can improve. What, and you can read and you can watch the news and you can do all those things, but until you've got boots on the ground, you just don't know what these other countries are like, how they're different, how they're better, how they're worse. So you're right. It's an important lesson.
So I would narrow it down even to within a state. Texas is a big state. California is a big state.
By the way, that's where the Cowboys are. They're in Texas. You asked where the guns and the Cowboys are. The Cowboys are in Texas.
Well, I tell you, we've been here a long time. We've only seen drawn guns twice. Once in New York City, where the police had stopped a car, and this one will blow you out the water. Once in our backyard, where the police chased a criminal over our back fence down the side of our house and arrested him leaning against our car.
Okay, not everybody has that story.
Right.
There you go. All right. We have not had that here at this home. We do have guns, and I've seen them drawn because we go across the street. We own some little bit of property across the street where we can go shooting and go plinking and just have a good time. But, not had the police race through yet. So I'll look for that. So your most recent lower 48 ABA bird.
Sure. Was that Amir Stonechat in Texas in March, I think, of this year, June. Earlier this year.
Did you go to Texas to see that bird?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. And was it difficult to find?
No, not at all. I wish I could remember the chap's name, but it was found on the Christmas count last December in an area of Anahuac Refuge, which has now been renamed, but I can't remember the new name, never mind, which was hunting only. It was not open to Joe public. It took 3 months to negotiate access for general birders. And then, of course, we all wanted to go. And they had a kind of lottery system where you could log in and get a carload to go there. And I managed to get a carload one of the very first days.
So, well, and that was your experience back with the Ottawa gang, where you were the chief driver putting together those carloads of people. So that experience paid off 50 years later.
Yeah.
Congratulations. What are some of the tougher birds that you've gotten, or kind of some funny stories about stumbling across a bird, or maybe a bird that had been a nemesis bird for a while and you finally nailed it? Help us out a little bit here.
All right. There are several birds that took me a long time, many trips to get the name of it. Now, I've got some notes here. I'm going to have to look at my notes.
Please do.
What the hell? Roadside hawk. Roadside hawk took 4 attempts to see it and finally did.
Southern Texas?
All in Texas, yeah. Banana quit took 3 trips to Florida before I finally got one, thanks to Sandy Comedo, who eventually found it. If you want to do birding characters, by the way, Sandy Comedo is the ultimate birding character.
He's passed away.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
And for those that don't know, if you've seen the movie The Big Year,
yeah,
one of the 3 characters in that book was based on Sandy Komodo. Another one was Greg Miller, who has been a guest on our podcast, and is the only one of the 3 that has survived to today. But if you haven't seen that movie, whether you're a birder or not, it's a fun and a good movie. And so I highly recommend it. And
it calms down the character of Sandy, I tell you. In real life, he was far more out there than that.
Wow. And that's the Owen Wilson character, by the way. You've got Steve Martin, Jack Black, and Owen Wilson, and Jack Black plays Greg Miller, and Owen Wilson plays Sandy.
One of the ways I picked up a lot of rarities, I worked for a Canadian company called Northern Telecom. They are now bankrupt. And I was based here in California, and they were in Toronto and Ottawa. And once a month, I had to go back to Canada for staff meetings. And as you well know, Miami and Boston and Nantucket are en route between San Francisco and Ottawa.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly. I'm going to double check a map, but okay, let's just go with that. I had to
train every new boss I got. I trained them to understand that I would never put in an expense account where the airfare was more than the company were willing to pay, and often less. I mean, the best one I did was San Francisco, Miami, Miami, Boston, Boston, Nantucket, Nantucket, Boston, Boston, Toronto, and I saved $100. And
okay,
so you only get 2 hours to find the bird, and it's hit or miss. But it's 2 hours that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
It's a better shot than nothing, right?
Exactly. So
Yeah,
that's
it's
how I
you know,
got a lot of money.
it's interesting that the expense report manipulation, and I don't mean that in a negative way. When I was a kid, before I started my own company, I was a salesman and I flew quite a bit. And I went to my boss one day, and my wife and I were blessed with a number of friends around the country, but we had no money. Maybe I wasn't a good salesman, but we had no money. So I went to my boss and I said, "Look, if you're going to pay X for my flight, and then you're going to pay Y for my lodging. If I can eliminate the cost of the lodging and buy my wife a ticket with that money so that you're not spending any more money and my wife and I would get to go, and we would always either go out the weekend before or the weekend after to stay with friends or family." And he said, "I don't care what you do with the weekends. And if you tell me that it's the same or even a little less for you to bring Randy with you, that's my wife, please do it." And so but I only had to train one boss, because after that, I started my own company,
Right.
misunderstanding the difficulty of starting a company. But yeah, so it was the same thing. My wife and I got to see a lot of the country together for no cost. And that's a beautiful thing. You got to find birds, no extra cost to the company, and sometimes some savings. That seems to me like a win-win-win.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. And you design computers, right? You're a mathematician and you design computers?
Sorry, forgive me for repeating what you've just said, but I told you that when we came to North America, we went to Canada, not to the United States, mainly because of parental influence from World War II. One of the first trips we ever made was to a conference from Canada, from Ontario, to Atlantic City. And I persuaded my boss to let us drive and instead of my flight, we drove. I went to the conference. Brenda sat with our 2-year-old daughter on the Atlantic City boardwalk, and we learned how wonderful Americans are. And that sounds romantic and it sounds rather mushy, but it was true. The number of people that came up and made a fuss of our daughter and said hi, it softened all sorts of biases.
Well, that's fantastic. And I have to believe that that's universal. Puppies and infants, I think, bring out the sensitive side of almost everybody. And if it doesn't, it's probably not someone you want to spend time with.
Well, that's for sure.
If you don't a little bit at a little cute little 2-year-old girl or a puppy, and you got to have one cold heart. And so I'm glad that we were able that you could wade between the guns and the cowboys and see that we had some other things here. Now, I think that as people have gotten to know you in the last half hour or so, they're not going to be surprised that this word is associated with you. But you have described hardcore birding as bounding one's own insanity.
Yeah.
Have you been successful at bounding your insanity, by the way?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
I'll go back to the collecting gene. Brenda is questioning that decision. I'll go back to the collecting gene. There are many different types of collecting, but I'm going to split it into two.
Okay.
Bounded and unbounded.
Okay.
Shall we say collecting egg cups? There are thousands and thousands and thousands of egg cups. There's no way you could collect one of each. Whereas birds, mammals, trees, and some physical man-made things, there's only a limited number of them. It is possible to aim for 100%, even though you're never going to get there. It's bounded, so that you're boxed in to an extent. That's what I mean by bounding my own insanity.
I like that, by the way. I'm also a collector. I collect first editions of John Steinbeck's Travels with Charlie. I collected poker chips for years. I mean, I have a number of things that I've collected. But for me, one of the things that I look for in a collection is a finite number. And to your point, I don't have to believe I can get to that finite number, but I have to know there is one. And so if it's just happening every day that there are new things being added and anybody can add them, for me that is unsettling. And so I like that, and that's why I enjoy having lists. I enjoy having goals. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to see, and I don't know. It just makes it fascinating for me. But I'm glad you've got that. Now, you have talked about birding and listing and for the people at your level, of which there are very few, but that it is competitive but not exclusive. Help me understand what you mean by that.
What I mean is that within the birding community, seeing a new bird for yourself is great. Being with somebody else when they see a new bird is almost as great. It's 99.9%. So sharing the information, listening to their stories and sharing stories just like this, to me is very much part of the pleasure. So it's competitive, but it's not my football team is better than yours, and there's no damn way I'm going to help you in any way.
And I've described that, again, relatively new birder. I mean, I've been birding 5 years. But when people ask me about it, I have described that. I said, I believe that people get, to your point, 99% as much joy putting somebody else on a bird as they do. It's like, my God, look at this. It's an XYZ, and don't you want to see it? And especially if it's one they've been looking for, or one that they're, really interested in, or should be. Maybe they're not even aware of it. And it in no way diminishes you having seen the bird. It's not a sum zero game.
That is a key point. Absolutely.
Now, are there the occasional person that are so petty that they're looking at a bird that they know would be important to you and they don't tell you because they don't want you to get it on your list? I'm sure those people exist. I've not run into them. But for me in the birding community, I find as generally the least experienced birder in a group, because I've been fortunate to spend time with some pretty experienced birders. They are thrilled about getting me or somebody like me on a bird, and especially if it's a great gray owl, right? Or a northern hawk owl, or something that not everybody gets to see or doesn't get a good look at. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about this community is people's willingness to do that. I'm sure you've made and received those calls. Bruce, did you know there's an XYZ at the beach today? Or, and you and Brenda are in the car and you're down to go see it. And you make those calls. Hey, Scott, I think you were looking for an ABC. I can get you on that. Do you want to meet me there? What do you want to do? And I love that. I think that is a magical part of this community. And really the fact that sharing it with other people enhances the moment, does not detract or deter from it in any way. And that's a magical thing. And so for those of you that aren't really involved in the birding community, and I'm not saying that doesn't exist in other collecting communities, by the way, but, especially in the animal world, right? If you're out looking at mammals, it's a true joy to share that grizzly bear with somebody else. Actually, maybe even put them in front of you as you share the grizzly bear. But yeah, so I love that about it. Now, you have said that you are a competitive man and you intend to stay number one okay. And so you've used the term with me in previous conversations that for you, birding is a numbers game. What does that mean?
Well, that goes back to the collecting. Collecting is numbers. It's as simple as that. As I say, I'm a mathematician by training. I love numbers. I was in the computing industry with the telephone systems, but it's way beyond that. It's as I said earlier, it's the introduction to the wildlife and the outdoor. So when we get to see a rare bird, there are those birders who will spend a day and a half staring at the one bird, describing every feather, every nuance of it. And that's wonderful. I'm not knocking that in any way, shape, or form. It's a different aspect of the hobby. Once I have seen the bird and I'm convinced myself, and that's the key phrase, I've convinced myself that I'm looking at what I think I'm looking at, that's the end of it from that experience. Move on to something else.
Yeah, you're good to go then.
Yeah.
You're not, okay. All right, fair enough. Now, you have the vast majority of birds that are available to be seen in the ABA, but there are a couple that are out there flying around completely disrespecting the fact that you haven't seen them. And in a recent conversation, so I don't know if it's still true, you had mentioned that New York had a Eurasian herring gull and Chicago had Eurasian goldfinch.
There are 3 ways to get new birds. One is the obvious: a vagrant turns up. That's the second record ever, and the first one was in 1876. And so that's the one opportunity. You better go now or you're never going to see it. The other is where they split one species into 2, and that's the herring gull. The herring gull, early this year, was split into several species, one of which is an American herring gull. That's the one we see all the time. And Eurasian herring gull, which I would say is rare but regular on the East Coast. They typically in the winter, and I am probably not going to make a special effort to go and see one, but I'll stop by to see one that happens to be there when I'm on my way to somewhere else.
Okay. All right.
Third type is where an introduced species whether it's an escapee or on purpose, is added to the official lists and therefore becomes countable because their populations have been deemed to be appropriate. They're breeding, they're expanding, whatever the rules that are put in down again, back to those rules again.
Right.
There are 3 of those at the moment. There's the Eurasian goldfinch in Illinois. There's great tit in Wisconsin, and I can never remember the name of that. There's a parakeet in Texas, in Florida, white-eyed parakeet. San Francisco, what about it? I've seen the parrot flight in San Francisco. Yeah, they are countable now. Yeah.
And actually, parrots and parakeets are a lot of those.
Yes.
Throughout Florida and Northern California, Southern California has a lot of them, and there's myths and legends about how did they escape initially from a pet store? Did Busch Gardens let them go when they closed Busch Gardens in Van Nuys in Southern California? And I don't know the exact rule, and I should look it up, but I believe they have to be a functioning breeding flock for 15 years. Before they're counted by the ABA. So you're right. They're always adding different birds. That helmeted guinea fowl will be added at one point. Here in the States.
And every now and again they make a mistake. They add a bird that was thought to be established, and lo and behold, it disappears. And there are 3 or 4 of those where they were on the ABA list, then they got taken off the ABA list, and then for some reason, which is beyond my logic, they added them back in if you saw them when they were on. Oh, I would love to discuss that with someone from the ABA sometime. So you have a failed introduction that was thought to be successful, but you can still count it if you saw it when it was thought to be successful.
Well, that does seem a little odd to me. And again, for those who aren't familiar, when you're talking about birds, there is a lot of lumping and splitting, and it happens every year. They announce the new ones. And so, you might have, the American herring gull and the Eurasian herring gull, you might have only had one check mark and they split them off, and you happen to have seen both, and you wake up one day and now you have an extra bird. The opposite can happen, where you've got a gray one and a tan one, and then people decide the birds haven't changed, but the politics have changed, or the determining boards have changed, and now they're going to put them together. A great example of that is a Harlan's hawk, which has been lumped and split 3 times already. It's currently considered a subspecies of the red-tailed hawk, although it has no red tail. It's a pure chocolate brown bird. And there are rumors that it's going to get split again and become its own species. But when that list comes out, you can wake up, the day after the list and go, hey, I've got 3 new birds, or I have 2 fewer birds than I had when I went to bed. But that is all debated by people above Bruce and I's pay grade.
And to me, it re-emphasizes the numbers game. As you said,
Yes.
The birds haven't changed.
Nope, not a bit. And the birds don't care, by the way. I don't think anybody notifies the herring gulls that they're no longer a single species. I don't think anybody calls them and says, excuse me, you're going to need to move off this beach. You're a Eurasian herring gull, and we can't count you. Or
I'm going to go all the way back to the first ABA, when the ABA was first formed.
Okay.
They have a magazine called Birding.
Yes.
And in the first few issues, they had cartoons. And the one I remember that's relevant to this was 2 woodpeckers on a tree. And the caption is, I don't care what the splitters say, the lumpers say, hop it, Buster. I'm not interested, hop it, Buster.
I like that, by the way. That's a good one. Do you have a favorite bird, Bruce?
Oh,
Do you have a favorite bird in the lower 48, and then you can throw out a favorite bird from around the world?
Any hawk. I like the raptors.
I knew there was a reason we liked each other. That was my version of a big ear. I chased the 53 raptors that you could find in the lower 48 states. I wrote a book about it called Raptor Quest, and I got on all 53.
That's cool.
That was my big ear. It was a raptor big ear.
You understand what you did? You bounded your insanity.
And I saved my marriage, because my wife suggested that if I thought I was going to go off and do a more traditional big ear, I should probably rewatch the movie and see what happens to Owen Wilson who winds up alone chasing birds in China. That's what was going to happen to me. But my wife bounded my insanity, and we agreed that I could go chase owls and hawks and vultures for a year, which was magnificent, by the
Oh,
way.
yeah, that's cool.
It was
That's
a great
cool.
show. You know what? Since you've brought up the Raptors, I did want to ask you about your favorite day, and I cheated because I know what it is. But you have a really cool great gray owl story.
Yeah. Very early in 1980, early in my birding, we heard that there was a great gray owl in the Ottawa area. And I went out early one morning with the window wound down, freezing my butt off, looking for this owl. And I finally found it sitting on a mound of some sort, probably a haystack, but it was covered in snow. And it was absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I was told at the time there were only 2,000 in existence. Turns out there are more than 2,000, but the rarity of it added to the thrill. And later that winter, I took Brenda and our daughter. I don't know whether our son was born yet. I don't think he was anyway. We went out looking for the owl so I could show it to them. And we found it sitting on top of a tree, and beneath the tree was flat snow, absolutely pristine snow. And almost to show off, the owl knew we were there because he looked at us and flew down, landed on the snow, dug in, and came out with a mouse or a vole or something. It found it purely by hearing it. And
They're amazing birds.
I'd read about that, but to actually see it was...
Yeah, it is something. I've gotten to see them a couple times. I saw them in Yellowstone, and I saw them at Sax-Zim Bog up in Minnesota. And I'm not sure I've seen a prettier bird than a great gray owl. You know, they're just, and you're right. The way they can dive into snow, they can go, if you don't know, they dive feet first into the snow in the winters, and they can hear mice or a vole or whatever's there up to 2 feet into the snow. They can hear the heartbeat and the breathing. So when you find a great gray, they're generally low in a tree because they're trying to get close to the sound and to what they're hunting. And to have seen it, and Bruce, like you, I've been blessed. I saw that in Yellowstone. I saw a great gray. And like you, by the way, I've frozen my butt off because if you're a photographer and you're out in the cold, you cannot have the windows up and the heater on in your car, or when you get out to take a picture, your camera fogs up. So when I found mine in Yellowstone, minus 25 degrees and snowing, windows down, no heater on, and clearly identifying that maybe I hadn't bounded my insanity quite enough. But it did explain why my wife wasn't with me. And I had 1.5 inches of snow on the floorboard because it was snowing and windy, and absolutely worth it when I got to see that great gray owl. Absolutely worth it. So that is spectacular. Thank you for sharing. Now, I'm going to ask you to share one more thing, and then I'm going to kick you out of your chair. So this is something we haven't done on a previous podcast, but we have started asking our guests to identify a book that they would like to highlight that they think the audience would be interested in. So I've got a final question for Bruce, and then we're going to switch, and we're going to get to see Brenda, who we've been listening to off camera, and she is going to share the book for the Barrett family. And then as we sign off and I, talk about field notes and different things, we're going to keep Brenda there. So when Bruce gets up and goes, he's done. But before you do, Bruce, although you haven't published it, you have written a book. Tell us about the book you've written and why it's not published.
I have written a book that is an annotated life list. It starts off by describing how I got into bird, some of the things we've been discussing now. There's several pages of that. And then I just go through my life list, what I remember. I don't remember too much in the early days, but recently I put down every bird I chase, whether I get it or not, the story of the chase, birds that have occurred that I have not gone for, I couldn't get to. I've just put it all in the book. Literally an annotated life list. My son and daughter may eventually publish it when I'm gone, but it's a living document.
Okay. And I happen to have a copy of that, by the way. And so at some point, I'll be auctioning that off to fund the extended retirement that I plan on.
Fair enough.
And there we go. So that is fantastic. Thank you very much. Bruce, thanks so much for being with us. I'm going to throw the email up now, my email address, because if you've got questions, send them to me. And if you've got questions for Bruce, send those to me as well, and I'll get those to Bruce, and he can do that. But now, let's move Bruce out of here and bring Brenda in. Bruce, thanks very much, sir.
Well, thank you.
While they're changing, we'll throw the graphic up for the action steps. If anybody wants to subscribe to this or like or comment, all of those things help and are much appreciated. It expands the audience and it's a terrific thing. So please do that and stay tuned afterwards when we're done here. And we are going to do field notes, which is my little segment, 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes, where I talk about whatever it is that I found fascinating in the bird, animal, park, or plant world. But for now, this is the great part, is we have Brenda Barrett with us. And Brenda, welcome, by the way. And I'm so glad that you're here and a part of this. And since you are the literary half of the Barrett couple, please share with us the book that you think the Barrett family believes our audience would be interested in.
Well, my favorite book is one that was a Nobel Prize winner many years ago, and it's called Christian Lavransdatter. It's a story of medieval Norway, and it's very detailed.
And is it related to nature? Does it talk about nature a bit?
No.
Oh, you know what? I apologize for the misunderstanding. We were looking for books that were nature related. Well, that's it.
Didn't realize we didn't get that. Sorry.
Well, that's okay. You know what? We'll throw that one up anyway. We'll do it just a little bit different this time. Brenda, thank you so much for this. I really do appreciate it. So again, thank you to Bruce and Brenda for being with us today and for a little slightly different book recommendation, which we will share. And as always, when you're out there, stay safe and stay curious. Enjoy your day. Hello and welcome to this edition of Field Notes. I think it's going to be a fun one for you. If you're familiar with Field Notes, following each podcast, I record a little, 6, 7, 8 minute thing where I talk about a bird, maybe an animal, a park, or could be anything different. And today is an or, which I think is going to be some fun. So I'm looking forward to doing this. If you just finished watching the Bruce Barrett podcast, which is the one this is connected to, then you might have an idea of what we're going to be talking about. And if you didn't, if you're watching this independently, we'll go ahead and share that with you now. But we are going to be discussing ABA countable birds. Bruce brought this up and it seems important, and especially, the fact that Bruce has counted more birds in the lower 48 states than anybody ever in the history of the world. Almost 900, 883 as of the time we're recording this. And he brought up what's countable and what's not. It's a discussion I've had with other people. And so we're going to do that. Now, these are the ABA rules that we're going to be sharing. And speaking of the ABA, you can go back a couple of podcasts and see that we've spoken to Wayne Klockner, who is the executive director of the ABA. And I just think that's a neat little relationship there. So which birds are countable, which means which birds does the ABA recognize as wild birds that you can count on a list that you might be keeping, whether it's county, state, lower 48, the full ABA, which is US, Canada, Hawaii, Alaska, and a little French island off the coast of Alaska, or whether it's the whole world. So there are rules that go along with that, and we're going to share those. Number one is the encounter location and time. So if you're doing, let's say, a big year in the lower 48, obviously you've got to find the bird in the lower 48. If you find it in Hawaii or Costa Rica or France, it doesn't count toward that. And equally obviously is the time of year. If you're doing a big year from, let's say, January 1 to December 31, 2025, you've got to find the bird inside that 12-month period. Now, outside of big years or countable locations, you can count any bird that passes all the other tests. But it is important to keep track of that so that you are doing the same thing that everybody else who's doing a big state or a big year or a lower 48 or whatever it might be. So these are the things that you have to do in addition to location and time. It has to be an approved species. That means that the ABA Checklist Committee has approved that bird to be a countable bird, and we're going to talk about what makes that up. But eventually, if there's a bird that's in question, and there are some, they go through the ABA Checklist Committee, they make their decision, and that decision is not always final because they do change those things, but it is the rule of the day, if you will. Now, ABA counts full species only. That means not subspecies, like a Harlan's hawk is a subspecies of a red-tailed hawk. If you see a Harlan's hawk, it just counts as another red tail, and it doesn't count color morphs. So if you see, let's say, an eastern screech owl that's gray, and then later you see an eastern screech owl that's red, those are different morphs of the same species, but you just get the one tick. This one is important. It is alive, wild, and unrestrained when you find it, which, by the way, is, I think, a great life motto, right? Alive, wild, and unrestrained. It's kind of a cool thing, but that is important. So that means no escaped chickens. You can't count birds in a zoo. You can't count the cute little pet that your daughter or your neighbor has. It has got to be out there in the wild, unrestrained, and alive. And so that means, you can't count a dead owl on the side of the road, even though you can identify the owl, even though you know it was alive within the last couple of hours. You just can't do it. And this is an ethical question, but before you submit a bird onto your list, you should be sure that you've got a positive ID. I usually use the 95 to 98% rule because I don't know what's really 100%. But if you're in doubt as to what it is, then you don't want to count it. You want your list to be as pure as it can be, something you can be proud of and that you can identify with. At least I believe that you could. And then you've got to conduct yourself ethically overall. Now, the ABA has conveniently provided us with a code of birding ethics, and I'm going to highlight those. Number one is to respect and promote birds and their environment. That seems easy enough. We try to treat the birds with as much distance as we can to allow them to live their lives and not impact that. Birds are always always worrying about balancing energy, especially your smaller birds, your songbirds and your sparrows and whatnot, because they can only hold so much energy in their body and they have to expend it in order to gather more food. And so we want to be respectful of that. We also want to, according to the ABA, respect and promote the overall birding community as well as its individual members. And that makes sense. If we talk up birding, we can bring in new birders. We want to treat the individual members with respect. So, and that's just logical. That's just actually just what you should be doing anyway, anywhere you go. But if a birder looks very intent on photography or very focused on something, you don't want to bother them. You don't want to be on the trail talking loud and scaring off the birds that they might have been waiting hours to see. And so that is important. And you want to respect and promote the law and the rules and the rights of others. Again, I think that just makes sense. What the ABA could have done is, instead of having those three rules and then they expand on each of them, they could have just said, be respectful, which I think is a really logical thing. It's all common sense and it's all common decency. Now, people will argue that common sense is not common and that common decency is not common. But if you exhibit common sense and you exhibit common decency, you are meeting those rules. However, now is when it gets a little bit tricky, okay? This is the criteria for non-native species. So these are the things that are a bit in question by a number of the ABA people. These are the things that are debated, and these are the things that even when the ABA committee comes up with the rules, a number of people are not going to agree with. So we're going to talk about those. Number one, the bird that you see has to be part of a population, not just an individual or a couple of isolated escape pets in order for it to be a countable bird. It has to, especially if it's unusual, a rarity or an oddity, it's got to be documented well. And that usually means a photo, which can be difficult. Now, sometimes experienced birders are given a little more leeway when they give a very, very strong and well-defined update on what the bird looked like and the habitat that it was found in and the time of day and the location. But again, ultimately, somebody's going to review that and tell you whether it passes muster or not. They need to be long-term. Generally, the long-term presence is generally considered that they are present and reproducing, which means they have successfully become a part of the environment, successfully become a part of the habitat for a minimum of 15 years. If you want to learn a little bit more about that, go to the YouTube channel, and Kian Almeride has a short clip on there called Parrots in LA, which is really fun because you talk about where these parrots came from. They're not native to the lower 48 states, but many parrots and parakeets are now countable because these escaped pets have formed flocks. They've lived a long time. There are those that think maybe they came from Busch Gardens in Van Nuys in Southern California. Escaped pets from pet stores are a very common thing. But in California and in Florida and in Texas, we have a lot of parrots and parakeets now that are counted. And last is no eradication program, at least one that is not likely to succeed. So if there is a program developed that's going to eliminate that bird, then the ABA does not want you to count it. On the other hand, if you're not worried about whether it's countable or not, you can simply look up and say, and isn't that a pretty bird? Isn't this a great day? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I want to thank you for listening. If you get a chance to subscribe, if you get a chance to put down some comments, if you get a chance to like the work we're doing, it gives us a chance to do more of it. And as always, when you're out there, stay safe and stay curious. Thank you for being a part of today's Field Notes. I'm already looking forward to doing the next one.